Crazy former employee. When I was 19, almost 20, I somehow found myself running our hometown chain pizza shop. Looking back now, it still feels strange. Most people my age were worried about college classes, parties, or figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives. Meanwhile, I was opening and closing a restaurant, handling schedules, dealing with angry customers, and trying to keep a bunch of teenagers focused long enough to make pizzas correctly. Our store was one of those places that always seemed busy. Friday nights were chaos. The phones never stopped ringing, drivers were running in and out carrying delivery bags, and the oven stayed full for hours. We didn't have enough adult employees, so most of my staff consisted of teenagers. Anyone under 18 or anyone who couldn't drive usually worked inside making pizzas. They prepared dough, answered phones, folded boxes, cleaned dishes, and stocked ingredients. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept the place running. Over the couple of years I worked there, I saw every kind of employee imaginable. Some kids were incredible. They showed up early, worked hard, and actually cared. Others lasted maybe 2 weeks before deciding that having a job was too much responsibility. We had lazy workers, overly dramatic workers, and a few who acted like making pizzas was somehow the hardest job in the world. Then there was this one guy. He was around my age, maybe a year younger or older. From the very first day, something about him seemed off. I don't mean dangerous. At least not then. He just had this trashy, chaotic energy around him. He was hot-headed and constantly irritated about something. If someone got more hours than him, he'd complain. If another employee made a mistake, he'd complain. If I asked him to clean dishes while someone else answered phones, he'd complain about that too. The strange thing was that he spent so much time worrying about everyone else that he never paid attention to his own work. I'd walk into the kitchen and find him standing there watching another employee. Why does he get to make pizzas? Why is she taking a break? Why am I doing this? I wanted to tell him the same thing every single time. Because you're standing around talking instead of working. I tried being patient. After all, we were basically the same age. I remembered what it was like to be young and immature. Some people simply needed guidance. I talked to him privately. I explained expectations. I encouraged him to focus on himself instead of everyone else. Nothing worked. Every shift with him became exhausting. One night during dinner rush, we had orders stacked across the screen. The phones were ringing non-stop, and everyone was moving as quickly as possible. I looked over and saw him arguing with another employee. Actually arguing. During rush hour. Over who was supposed to refill the cheese containers. I couldn't believe it. I walked over and told him to stop and get back to work. He rolled his eyes. That irritated me more than it should have. I remember saying, I don't care who fills the cheese containers. I care about the 15 orders waiting right now. He muttered something under his breath and finally went back to work. Things like that happened constantly. He wasn't a terrible employee because he lacked intelligence. He was a terrible employee because he couldn't stay out of his own way. Every little issue became personal. Every inconvenience became a problem. Every instruction somehow turned into an argument. Even the other employees started getting annoyed with him. When I made schedules, I had people specifically asking not to work shifts with him. That says a lot. Restaurant employees put up with nearly anything. They're used to chaos. But even they were tired of him. Then one day, he simply stopped showing up. No phone call, no text. Nothing. The first day, I assumed he was sick. The second day, I wondered if something had happened. The third day, I stopped caring. Eventually, I marked him as terminated. That was it. No dramatic ending. No big confrontation. He just disappeared from our lives. After a while, I honestly forgot about him. Restaurant jobs are like that. People come and go constantly. You meet dozens, maybe hundreds, of coworkers over the years. Most become distant memories. A few you remember fondly. Others you barely remember at all. He became one of those people. A few months after I left the company, one of my former employees contacted me. She and I had stayed friends. She asked me a random question. "Do you remember that guy who worked with us? The one who disappeared?" It took me a second. Then I remembered. "Yeah," I said. She told me he had applied again. Apparently, he wanted his old job back. Then she asked, "Would you rehire him?" I laughed. Not because it was funny. More because I hadn't thought about him in months. I told her the truth. He wasn't a great employee. He was annoying and always causing problems. But if you're desperate for a warm body, he can physically make pizzas. She laughed too. That was basically my entire review. I didn't hate the guy. I wasn't trying to ruin his chances. I just answered honestly. Apparently, they decided not to bring him back. Again, I forgot about him. Years passed. 6 years, to be exact. Life moved on. I changed jobs. People got married. Some had kids. Others moved away. The pizza place became nothing more than an old chapter of my life. Then one evening, everything changed. I was scrolling through social media when I saw a local news story. I almost kept scrolling. The headline mentioned an assault. That kind of thing unfortunately happens all the time. But then I saw the picture. I froze. I recognized him immediately. It was that former employee. The same guy who constantly complained. The same guy who worried about everyone else's business. The same guy who disappeared from work. According to the report, he had attacked a woman. Not during an argument. Not during a robbery. Not in self-defense. He had apparently attacked her from behind in her own driveway. In the middle of the night. With a metal baseball bat. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I reread the article several times. It didn't seem real. I kept thinking there had to be another person with the same name. But there wasn't. It was him. I remember sitting there feeling genuinely disturbed. Not because we had been friends. We weren't. Not because I cared deeply about him. I didn't. It was disturbing because I had known him. I'd worked beside him. I'd spoken to him nearly every day. I'd watched him make pizzas and complain about schedules and argue over cheese containers. He had once been just another annoying coworker. Now he was on the news for a brutal attack. I kept wondering what happened during those 6 years. Did he slowly become more unstable? Was he always like that deep down? Were there signs nobody noticed? Or was this something that nobody could have predicted? I don't know. Maybe nobody ever will. The truth is, most people we meet only show us small pieces of themselves. We see coworkers for a few hours at a time. We know their habits. We know their personalities. But we don't really know what's happening inside their minds. That's the unsettling part. When I think back on all those years at the pizza shop, I remember funny stories, crazy customers, and hardworking employees. But every now and then, I remember him. And every time I do, the same thought crosses my mind. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories don't involve strangers. Sometimes they're about people you used to work beside while making pepperoni pizzas on a Friday night. And years later, you turn on the news and realize that someone who once seemed like nothing more than an annoying employee has become the subject of a headline that leaves everyone asking the same question. How did things ever get this far? To this day, I still don't have an answer. All I know is that every workplace has people who leave an impression. Some for good reasons. Some for bad reasons. And then there are the ones you never expect to see again, until they suddenly reappear in the most shocking way imaginable. That former employee became one of those people. Absolutely fucking bonkers.